Okay, welcome back, everybody. Welcome back, Council. Thank you for our delegates from the Alberni Valley Heritage Commission, our representatives from the Alberni Valley Heritage Commission, to participate in this section of the Committee of the Whole. Purpose Council is to discuss the mandate and role of the Alberni Valley Heritage Commission and to review the Heritage Commission establishing bylaw. We've certainly had it on our radar for quite a while to review this, and there's been a whole series of motions over the last several years about museum and how we want to transform that into a different kind of structure, but not the museum itself, but it's the governance piece that we're looking at. So, CIO, I'm wondering if you're able to go through the bylaw that established the Heritage Commission as it currently stands.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sure I wouldn't do as good a job of that as Mr. Morton.
If only I had it in front of me.
Who wants to review the bylaw?
We can put it up here so you can just read it off. Okay, we're loaded. So, City of Port Alberni, bylaw number 4687, a bylaw to establish Community Heritage Commission. Whereas the Council of the City of Port Alberni, hereinafter referred to as the Council, has established the Alberni Valley Museum, and whereas Section 953 of the Municipal Act, RSBC 1996, Chapter 323, provides authority for City Council to establish Community Heritage Commission, and whereas it is deemed advisable to establish a Community Heritage Commission as an advisory body to City Council in heritage matters, now therefore the Council of the City of Port Alberni in open meeting assembled enacts as follows. Title: This bylaw may be known and cited for all purposes as the Community Heritage Commission Bylaw, 2008 Bylaw number 4687. Establishment and name of commission. There is hereby established a Community Heritage Commission, hereinafter referred to as the Commission. 3. Composition of the Commission. The Commission shall consist of 16 members as follows: 2 members of the Alberni District Historical Society, 2 members of the Western Vancouver Island Industrial Heritage Society, 2 members of the Port Alberni Maritime Heritage Society, 2 members representing the community at large, 1 member representing Alberni Valley Tourism, 1 representative appointed by the Board of School Trustees of School District 70, Alberni, 1 member of the Council of the City of Port Alberni, 1 member of the Board of Directors of the Regional District of Alberni-Clayoquot, and 1 member of the Upachusett First Nation, 1 member of the Sashat First Nation, 1 member of the Community Arts Council of the Alberni Valley, 1 member of the Alberni Valley Chamber of Commerce. 4. Term of appointment of members of the Commission. The aforesaid members of the Commission shall be appointed as follows. The Alberni District Historical Society shall appoint 2 members. In each even-numbered year, the Society shall appoint 1 member for a 2-year term. In each odd-numbered year, the Society shall appoint 1 member for a 2-year term. The Western Vancouver Island Historical Society, that should be Industrial Heritage Society, I believe, shall appoint 2 members. In each even-numbered year, the Society shall appoint 1 member for a 2-year term. In each odd-numbered year, the Society shall appoint 1 member for a 2-year term. The Port Alberni Maritime Heritage Society shall appoint 2 members. In each even-numbered year, the Society shall appoint 1 member for a 2-year term. In each odd-numbered year, the Society shall appoint 1 member for a 2-year term. City Council shall appoint 2 members of the community at large for a 2-year term. In each even-numbered year, Council shall appoint 1 person for a 2-year term, and in each odd-numbered year, Council shall appoint 1 person for a 2-year term. Alberni Valley Tourism shall appoint in each even-numbered year 1 representative for a term of 2 years. The Board of Trustees of School District 70, Alberni, shall annually appoint 1 representative to serve a 1-year term. The Council of the City of Port Alberni shall annually appoint one representative to serve a one-year term. And the Board of Directors of the Regional District of Alberni-Clayoquot shall annually appoint one representative to serve a one-year term. Hoopatchesett First Nation shall appoint in each odd-numbered year one representative to serve a two-year term. The Sashat First Nation shall appoint in each even-numbered year one representative to serve a two-year term. The Alberni Valley Community Arts Council shall appoint in each odd-numbered year one representative to serve a two-year term. And the Alberni Valley Chamber of Commerce shall appoint each even-numbered year one representative to serve a two-year term. The Commission shall advise Council annually prior to the first day of February of the names of all appointees to the Commission. Do we want to go through the whole bylaw?
No, I think,
Down to the purpose? Okay.
yeah.
Let's just scroll down to that then, please.
Mr. Mayor, if I can jump in, I misspoke a moment ago. I should have referenced Dr. Jamie Morton. I'm sorry, Jamie.
Thank you.
Okay.
We'll take care of you, Jack. Duties of the Commission. The Commission shall, A, advise on policies and objectives relating to operations of the Alberni Valley Museum, the McLean Mill National Historic Site, and other community heritage resources. B, advise Council with respect to any and all heritage issues on behalf of heritage groups in the community, and advise on specific heritage issues that may be referred to them by Council. C, act in an advisory capacity to coordinate and support the interests of heritage groups in the Alberni Valley and the Alberni Heritage Network, and liaise with these groups in forming recommendations to Council. And the Commission shall be entitled to receive the services of the Director of the Alberni Valley Museum or designate. The Commission shall keep minutes of each meeting.
Can you summarize how the committee functions?
Yeah. The Commission meets monthly, except for the summer months normally, furlough in July and August. The group meets, the composition has changed somewhat from what you saw there. Of course, Alberni Valley Tourism doesn't really exist as it did previously. It basically takes two parts in the meeting. The first part is a look at any correspondence that's come in, any requests for information, etc., and any issues that have cropped up in terms of heritage or cultural activities in the community, things that need some sort of input from the Heritage Commission in the opinion of the commissioners. The second part is normally a report. Each group in the organization does report on what their activities have been, what's upcoming, what they feel the other members need to do. In other words, in addition to the mandate as outlined in the 3-point thing you saw there, one of the most important functions of it is the networking function between the heritage and cultural groups in the region to keep them each other apprised of what's going on. There's actually been a couple of cases recently in this year where events have been in conflict with each other, things have been moved around as a result of that. And it's a good way just to kind of keep track of what other groups are doing, what kind of initiatives perhaps one group can share with another. A nice example of that recently was the Historical Society and the Maritime Heritage Society sharing an evening event dealing with the steam launch Swan. It was very well attended. There were 78 people attending it. A nice kind of synergy between the groups in the case of an event like that, which was hosted by the Alberni Valley Museum in Echo Center. So it's that kind of activity that is an informal role of the Heritage Commission in addition to its mandated role.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Morton. So maybe just give you a little bit of background in terms of where the city was coming from. It says this is the Alberni Valley Museum, but in fact, it's in terms of how's it paid for, it's the Port Alberni Museum. And yet, it really is a museum that, in a lot of ways, is almost regional, but it certainly is far beyond the interest of just the city of Port Alberni. And it, you know, I think it'd be fair to say that people within the entire valley and who have attachments to the valley, whether you've lived in the city or not, claim it as their own. See it as, this is ours. This is our asset. And everything that goes into it is our asset. And yet, if you look at what happens in other communities, and if you look at the Stats Can report on incomes, the area of the Alberni Valley that has the lowest average income is the city of Port Alberni. And the areas of Port Alberni that have the highest average income are outside of the city limits. And yet it's those people with the lowest average income that are paying 100% of the cost of this particular venture. So in terms of what's fair, it's fair to invite those people who don't live within the city to contribute to the cost of this, to the maintenance and so on and so forth. But we also see, and I'm sure council will be able to expand on this a little bit, but we also see that the model that we have in the city of Port Alberni is, even though this started this bylaw is from 2008, the notion that the city of Port Alberni pays 100% of the costs is actually started before that, in a different time, in a different economic circumstance. City of Port Alberni, I don't need to remind you people that, you know, we were among the wealthiest communities in Canada, and we were very used to having a huge amount of money from the industrial tax base, and if we needed more money, it always seemed that McMillan Bloedel would step up and contribute. That's no longer the case. And so how do we share that load? And what's the fair way to share that load? And how do we expand the base of the museum to be more inclusive? Because it's our perspective that we see it as arts, culture, and heritage, not just heritage and not just arts and not just culture. So we want to expand that, and we've created a bit of a model with the Maclean's Mill Society that is beginning to show some success. And we're aware that there are some interests beyond our valley that are interested in contributing, both in terms of knowledge and in finance, to make this more than it currently is, if we choose to go that route. So as a council, we're looking to see if there's a different form of governance that reflects more commonly what the practice is in the rest of the province. With us searching around, and Jamie, you could correct me, but there are 3 cities that pop to mind that pay for 100% of the cost of their museum: Port Alberni, and New Westminster, and Vancouver.
And Delta has just recently taken over its museum.
And yes, and I know that that Princeton is considering taking over the cost of their museum. But when you think about the number of communities that there are in BC, our model does not represent the norm. Our model represents communities that have significant additional financial resources. We're not like Burnaby, where we're sitting on a $1 billion heritage fund or reserve fund. We struggle for the money that we have. So how do we create a governance model that allows us to address the need, I won't say the responsibility, but the need to look after heritage, and while at the same time see if we can look after our arts and our culture? how do we create those opportunities? And so we decided as a council that the best route was to create one overarching board that we would contribute to, we would give a grant to, the same way we give a grant to the McLean's Mill Society, but it be set up as an independent society that would include, in terms of financial contributions, the First Nations, and I think we've got the message, the regional district. Because everybody gets to benefit from what we're creating. Everybody within the valley gets to contribute and benefit from what we're considering creating. So that's kind of a little bit of the background in terms of our thinking. And we have a number of assets, both the Maritime Museum and the Alberni Valley Museum that can be part of it, but then we have the Roland Arts Center, and we have the the Industrial Heritage Society that can be part of it, and that's what we're looking at in terms of a potential for a inclusion in the new governance model. Before I open it up to you, or anybody else on council wish to say anything, or if I kind of described our thinking? Jack?
I think you described pretty well how we discussed it in the last budget and beyond. We haven't gone there yet. It's going to slow them down, but maybe something else would be better, but let's see what happens.
Okay, so I'm not sure what you're hoping for, but it's kind of what we're thinking. And so Teresa Kingston, of course, was the person charged with the responsibility to move this process forward, and she has, as far as she was able to, and now Will is here to take it to the next stage. Okay, Pam.
Thank you very much, Mayor Rattan. I really appreciate your explanation in regards to how the council is thinking, hoping for a different direction, a different governance. But I think the commission would have appreciated that conversation a number of months ago. If you had had an opportunity to come to our meetings, and we meet the first Wednesday of the month, and give us an idea of where you were going and the ideas that you had in regards to the governance of the Heritage Network in our community. And sitting at that table was a representative from virtually every group that would have any impact around the heritage in this community. So it would have been a good conversation for you to have had and got some feedback from those individuals sitting at the table. So having heard now your thinking, it still leaves us wondering, what now do you want from us? Are you looking to adjust the bylaw to accommodate the changes that have happened over the last couple of years and keeping the commission involved, or are you going to suggest that the commission be disbanded and move to the governance model? I don't see right now, though, that you're ready to move to that governance model, and perhaps you would like to see those expertise coming from the commission still available to you. I don't know any other commission members.
Well, so let me respond to that, Pam. In terms of speaking directly to the Heritage Commission, frankly, I thought, and I imagine the rest of council thought, that we were being represented by Teresa Kingston, who was our director, and she was the one who said, yes, I can move this forward, and I understand what it is that you want, and so we didn't really feel that there was a direct need for us to get involved. Certainly would have if that had been communicated to us, but it wasn't. Sorry?
We also have a representative.
And we do have a representative on the Heritage Commission as well. In terms of the direction that we want to go, are we terminating this? No. I mean, we felt that the whole part of the process was, let's explore what it is, what sort of the overarching ideal, and then part of the process is, how do we achieve this? What's a realistic way to achieve this? And in the end, is the vision that we have achievable? Or is there some other model that will perhaps work even better? So we didn't have an idea of this governance model has to be this. We had an idea that we wanted to make a change. We particularly want to make a change in terms of how it's funded. But in terms of the actual governance model, we didn't have that absolute final decision made, because really it's a collective decision about how we get there and what it should look like. We're not in a position of wanting to just impose it. What we're wanting to do is to create something that actually is an improvement over what we have had. Because, as I mentioned, we've essentially got 4 different groups currently that are sometimes competing for resources and competing for personnel, competing for council attention, and so on and so forth. Is there some way to make it better? Dan, did you want to say something?
Yes, I would, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Back on the 27th of March at a regular meeting, the item was directed to pursue a development of tripartite agreement between the city, CSHAT, Hoopachesset for the operation of the Alberni Valley Museum. Status: letters were sent to the CSHAT and Hoopachesset on May 15th, meeting to be arranged shortly. So basically, we have had nothing to communicate, no updates. I'm just defending myself a little bit here because no, there hasn't been nothing from us to them. We've got no responses from the First Nations group, so I'm thinking we needed that first before we could proceed with anything else.
And it's been a challenge because we've been a transition between directors, so it's a lot for Willa to pick up and understand, and there's all these personalities, and you got enough. So we weren't pressuring to get it done because we realized that there's some things that are realistic. And the realistic thing was her first responsibility was to make sure she had Parks and Rec under control. Pam.
I'd just like to respond as well. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Washington. And that's where we're at. We, of course, weren't directly involved in those kinds of decisions that you made, nor were we consulted directly. We knew about things that were changing and suggestions that were happening in the community, but we really needed to have direct consideration from the members that sit at that table. Those members represent probably tens of thousands of volunteer hours that have been contributed to this community, building over the last 20 years from the Heritage Network. It was devised early in the 2000s, bringing all the groups together, finding ways to interact, connect, and plan together. And that network was based on the idea of establishing that draw for our community to bring the cultural tourism dollars into our community. And the commitment and dedication of those volunteers has just been outstanding and amazing. The work that's gone into building up those resources and maintaining them and preserving them. And so there, you have to recognize that part of that actual emotion because they've worked so hard and not really getting a clear direction as to how things are going to move, although there are some ideas out there going around, but nothing definitive that we could really hang our hat on. And as Councillor Washington said, this has been since March that we haven't had any further change or direction. So what do? Do we continue to meet? Can we continue to contribute as a commission to the community?
And we haven't done anything to change the current mandate. And, I think we're now, maybe Willa wants to talk about what she's thinking about in terms of next steps. But, we want to move the process forward for sure. But it's not realistic for us to think, okay, here's this magic date and we want to accomplish this by this magic date. But we also recognize that we do want to move the process forward, and we want to make it as inclusive as we possibly can. So I don't know, Willa, if you have some ideas or...
Yeah, so just to verify as well that there has been a face-to-face meeting with one of the nations, and the other we're looking to bring to the table shortly, which I've also had the conversation with staff directly to sit down together to discuss, details of the budget specifically and get them involved in a sort of a higher level of collaboration, I think, than historically has happened. And so I guess forgive my ignorance, but part of my question as well is that I'm hearing that the mandate hasn't changed, and I'm hearing that we're not moving the needle forward. So in my role, I'm sort of understanding, so what's the question on the table, or where do we go from here?
Well, we still have that end goal, which is to create this overarching board.
Mhm.
And we have a bit of a model in the McLean's Mill Society. So it's an independent society that is now responsible for city assets, but they have some opportunities to create a financial model where they're paying more of their own costs than they were. So we're wanting to move in that direction. How do we get from where we are to where we ultimately want to get to, which is an independent board for arts, culture, heritage, so an overarching board.
Right, so if I'm hearing you, we're saying that talking about this transition period or taking us to that next step, and how do we ensure that we're honoring volunteers and folks that are investing their time all along the way, and we're not sort of moving forward without, honoring both the historical aspect and then also keeping a direct line of sight of where we're looking to go.
And each one of those groups has been heavily involved in their particular interest for, some of them literally for generations. When I think about that, some of them for generations, because it does go from parent to child to grandparent. So how do we move that forward, so that ultimately we end up with a situation that is an independent nonprofit that the city contributes to, and probably would contribute to very substantially, but that it's not 100% the financial responsibility of the city? What does that model look like? How do we get to be more like other communities in BC?
That's a great question. And I think that's where we're looking at, in my mind, it's sitting down like I have directly with the staff, getting all of those stakeholders or groups together so that, again, we're honoring those folks, and also looking at if there's a model that is currently working in another sort of segment of or department, or however you wish to describe it, how can we tap into that resource as well? And so, like I say, that's sort of my confusion of the need to come to council. That's where, like I say, I'm the one who's late to the party here, and not understanding all of the historical aspects. But again, I feel confident. So just as we've been able to bring a First Nation to the table for some discussion, I think also then maybe it's somewhere where I need to step in and sit down with the commission directly and have some sort of discussion there. I want it to be meaningful exchange. I don't want to go through the motions because we've been to a council meeting and here's what the next course of action is. I really am keen to, let's figure out what the best way is forward. And frankly, I'm not sure what that model looks like, because I think if it was that easy, we would have already.
It's not easy, which is why it's taken 2 years. But also what we as a council need is, what does that roadmap look like? Let's have this realistic evaluation of where we're at, because we have accomplished some things. There has been a fair amount done. And how do we get from where we are to where we hope to be? And more importantly, what is it that we hope to get to? Right. What do we ultimately hope to achieve that each one of those groups can support?
And I think going back to what Pam was saying about this idea of thanks for thank you for the update of understanding what that landscape is, I would feel comfortable that if we know what that sort of end game is or that end point is, sitting down with those groups and saying, okay, how do we sort of reverse engineer from that point, and who needs to be around the table to get us to that that point. But it sounds like just being clear on exactly where there's been lots of change and things over the years. So again, getting clear with where we're looking to head. I feel very confident that we can do that at a department level and find a system, whatever that might be, to get there from here. And I'm open to whatever that looks like, whether it be a commission or a different governance model or whatever that is. I think we need to be open to whatever that possibility is.
So the Heritage Commission, as I said, is one out of the three participants in this governance model. We have a situation in the city of Port Alberni where we contribute towards the arts sector, Rollin Arts Center. Rollin Arts Center, between what the city owns and what it owns, is sitting on way more than $1 million worth of original art. But there's some major concern that, number one, people don't get to see it. And number two, we are in danger of losing some of it because they don't have the resources to properly preserve it. And yet it is ultimately a community asset. How do we work together to not only preserve that, but to make it more than it is? Because as Pam says, this can become this incredible attraction. There are thousands of people that would love to come and see this collection if, number one, they knew about it, and number two, it was in great shape. And it was displayed in some place where people could see it. So, for example, when that day comes in the future, when we have to replace our swimming pool, what if that swimming pool became a center where we show our art? We've also had an approach from China. This maybe seems weird, but the city hall for the city of Beijing is being moved. And it's being moved to a location in Beijing where they have set up an artist's village. And you go to this artist's village in Beijing to see the work of all these artists, but it's just as a village, it's an attraction. Well, because we have a direct connection with some of the people who are part of this village, they're actually interested in relocating some of their members to Port Alberni, at least on a part-time basis, and creating an artist village in Port Alberni that would work in partnership with artists who are already living here. Well, think about the interesting opportunities that creates. But the city doesn't have the capacity to really manage this stuff. But for us as citizens in the city, it presents this whole different vision, this whole different opportunity that who knows where it could lead. Would that kind of thing fit under the umbrella of an arts, culture, heritage board? And I don't know, I just know that we need to think about those things. And we need to think about all these other assets that the city of Port Alberni has, and how can we use those to greater benefit for the people, for the citizens of Port Alberni, the taxpayers of Port Alberni that are ultimately paying these costs. And when I think about, you talk about tens of thousands of hours collectively that goes in just into the heritage part. And then if we do the Rollin Arts Center and we do the Industrial Heritage Society on top of that, collectively, it's unbelievable that the thousands and the commitment that goes into it. That actually in our community, if we can harness it in a different way, is transformative for our community. And the rest of the world out there then says, hey, do you know what they have in Port Alberni? When you go and see their art collection, do you know what they have? When you go and see their museum, do you realize they have the world's largest collection of Newfoundland baskets? Do you know that? And actually, there's a bit of a change in what tourists are looking for when they come to Vancouver Island. And one of the things they're looking for is, show us the First Nations stuff. We want to see that. And you, having come from Prince Rupert, are fully aware of Kassan, and the whole world wants to go to Kassan to see this reconstructed First Nations village. It's amazing. And what do they look for? They look at the baskets, they look at the stories, they look at the dances, they look at the painting, they look at the carving. People that are on tour, they want to see that. But there is no place in Port Alberni really to see that. But yet, as a community, we are responsible for the world's largest collection of Newfoundland baskets. Pam?
Thank you very much. Just to follow up a little bit, Will, of this, this is nothing because you've only been here for a second based on the information that we need to share with you. And it will take more than one sit-down session to get you up to speed halfway. We have done a lot of work around the heritage throughout the last few years, as well as recently last spring we did a community engagement, bringing people in to talk about what they see as heritage, culture, and art in our community. And this is part of that report, which is something that we would certainly like you to go through with us and talk about it and see the comments from the general public out there and how much they respect that heritage in our community. And to make that plan to moving forward, it's not going to happen quickly, and I understand that. But the commission also needs to understand what their role is going to be in that. And if we are going to be still involved, and likely it sounds like we will be, we need to do a little bit more work with you and others in the community to bring forward the plan or dream that the council has for what in the future that might look like. And there's a lot of work involved in getting to that point and understanding the cost alone. How is that going to work? What kind of monies are going to have to be raised in order to maintain it? How do we raise those funds? And how much will the taxpayer have to be? But if you can get that commitment from the region, then that will change that dynamic completely. And likely it will be the new development once the pool is finally agreed upon and in the whole of the region. But that's going to take a while. And we need to continue working and preserving and taking care of what we do have until that happens.
Jack?
Yeah, thank you. And I guess what I was hoping to get out of tonight's committee of the whole session is what do the Heritage Commission members see as how they would like to be involved in the new governance situation? Like, we have a bylaw of establishing the Heritage Commission, how it's to be formed. It's pretty much up to date, I think, except for the Alberni Valley Tourism. I don't know if they exist in any form or not at this moment, but other than that, so that's kind of what I'd like to get a bit of a feeling for, because we have to make some decisions based on it coming close to budget time. We did have some deadlines that have already gone by, and we changed some of our direction when the concept of engaging the First Nation came in. So I guess that's what I'd like to hear, if I could, what you're thinking of. Like the mayor says, we've got to do things different. We took a stab at doing something different than McLean Mill. It had a real rough start, very rocky, and we were told nobody'd ever want to be on a commission for you guys again if that's the way they're treated. But so far they've stuck it out, and as much as I would like to see things done a bit different there than what has happened, they have not come back for any funds, which is probably a first, and are doing things that are making the most of the community happy, as far as I can tell. So I'd like to see something similar with the museum. It's been there a lot longer than I've been in town, and I've been to it a lot of times, and I guess I don't think people get to see it. I don't think there's a lot of change in it, and I think there's a whole lot of people that have got a lot of good ideas that could make that thing absolutely fantastic and see where it goes. That's what I'm looking for.
Thank you. Ron?
I'm just trying to kind of see things in a simple way, simple guy, but I think you're looking for what's expected of you in the short term, right? Like, how does this bylaw apply to you today, but also in the long term? And we have a recommendation from our previous, from the person who had your position previously with regards to arts, culture, and heritage. That process has, to my mind, stalled out. Some of it is trying to arrange meetings with First Nations, but we actually have a recommendation to look at that structure and how it may look. And I think that this group probably could help us get to either a yes or a no. And I'm a guy that loves to work towards yes. How do we get to yes? We know the concept, but how do we get to yes? So tonight, I think we need to give you some direction on what you are going to do tomorrow, but also something as what your role will be as we get these reports back over the next 6 months or 9 months or a year, kind of how this thing's going to progress. And you know, maybe we need to look at this bylaw tonight and see how relevant it is in all aspects. And for me, I see that your role doesn't change tomorrow, and it probably won't change until we move forward and either make a decision or don't make a decision on a governance model, whether it's relatively the same or if it's drastically different. But I just don't see in the short term, over the next 6 months to a year, that your role is going to change. That's my personal feel, anyway.
I actually wouldn't see us making a decision tonight, but I would see us essentially saying to you, well, okay, can we now move the process forward under your leadership?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I say, I think it's very doable from a department level. And I agree with Councillor Paulson around the idea of ensuring that we're all clear about what roles are, so we're not just going through the motions tonight and then everyone tomorrow going, well, that's an hour of my life I'm never going to get back, and I'm not really any further ahead than I was last night. So I want to make sure we're all clear as of today what sort of who's who and who's where, and then sitting down to make an action plan for let's sit down and meet and start to unpack some of the issues and where are we at currently, where we thought we might have been when we initially built the bylaw, and then sitting down and being action oriented to whatever that next step might be, and ensuring that we're honoring all those folks that have invested those volunteer hours and have invested that time, and we're not just throwing the bylaw out the window. We're sitting down and figuring out how to make this work in this huge process. I don't even know what step we're at, and that's why I've got to, like I say, bring myself up to speed to understand where are we at and why does it seem that things have sort of come unglued, and why folks are feeling that way, and how can we sort of rally back together and work together is my thing, what I'd like to see. Does that make sense to the commission as far as what next steps should look like?
Thank you. Well, it makes sense to me. I'll let others speak. You know, they may have comment as well, but there's a couple of things that I want council to consider in regards to the bylaw. It does not have a person or a direction for the McLean Mills Society that must be added to the list of participants. We did have participation in the sense that our museum director reported, as well as a former member of the chamber who was involved with McLean Mill also reported. So we do need that added to the bylaw. And I think the Alberni tourism, it's gone for sure, so that can be removed. But once those things are done, I would like to hear from council and councillors that they will respect the preservation of our artifacts and our heritage in this community. I'm very concerned about losing several $1 million of value of artifacts that aren't considered valuable. And I want to hear from council that they do value that and they will protect it. And also, as Will has just said, and I really appreciate that comment, Will, about reestablishing the honor of the volunteers and the confidence that they have been honored and that they will continue to be honored for the amount of time and effort that they put into this community over the last several decades, and in particular the last 15 to 18 years or so under the Heritage Network. So those are the three main things that I would like to see. I don't know if other commissioners have other comments.
Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wouldn't mind seeing the CAO perhaps maybe delegating his item 2, which is to contact the HOOPHS and the CSHAT for the operation of the Alberni Valley Museum, to meet with Director Thorpe, and also perhaps a bit of, I'll say a bit of number 6, because that's shared services with opportunities with the ACRD, and if he will allow her to get a hold of Regional District and see what their thoughts are. I mean, starting with probably with Director Cote, but going from there, and just let's get all the players in the same room and get the ball rolling, so to speak, sir.
Okay, Councillor Alberni, and then I'll turn to the CAO.
Thanks. I'll just be really honest. I'm not entirely sure what we're doing here. I'm not sure. I mean, council has a direction to put out or to pursue an agreement with the 2 First Nations, and that's all well and good, but we don't know where that process is, and it doesn't necessarily answer any of the questions that the commission has of us as far as what their purpose is for council going forward. I don't know. I'm really at a loss. I don't know where we are in the process. Personally, the function of the commission, as I understand it, is to bring those groups together and ensure that the arts and culture and heritage system in the valley is cohesive, and and everybody's communicating to each other and able to use resources that the city has or provides, and vice versa, for the betterment of the community. I don't see that changing, and even with the questions that council has brought up around where we go for a new governance model, I still don't see that purpose changing. Whether there's a new board or not, there will still be a need for that kind of cooperation in order to maintain the artifacts and the services and everything that's provided in the community for culture and heritage. But I don't know where we are in that, and I don't know that council is ready to. I don't think council as a whole is really aware of how things will move forward. It's a very fluid, kind of uncertain situation, and it's because it's a difficult decision to change something that's been a certain way for so long, and sure, we want to make it a more financially viable system for the city, but even then, that doesn't necessarily change anything. It just shifts where the money's coming from. It doesn't necessarily shift the amount of money that's going in. I think in the end, if we're going towards something that's a McLean Mill model, which I think has been, in its very short time, very successful, the basis of that success isn't the governance model, I don't think. It's the people and it's the asset. We have the people, and we have the assets buried, and sometimes maybe just not out there, but we don't have. I don't see I don't see a place where we could attract new funds into. I don't see that key resource for the city to go out to other communities and other players and say, hey, come here and check out our amazing artifacts, which we have in spades. But we don't have, that's, I think, what's missing. And I don't think that changing the governance model would necessarily fix that. We have to build maybe something new in order to really realize the potential of that. And maybe that's a new pool.
Well, you're
but-
actually talking about a process pertaining to the McLean's Mill Society
Right.
that happened away from council. I mean, they when they were establishing, we gave them a mandate. We gave them a year to come back with a proposal, which they did, and all of these kind of discussions happened outside of council chambers, and there were lots of difficult conversations and lots of groups and subgroups that were part of that before they finally came back to us with the
Right, but
with
the
proposal.
the main, I think, the success of it wasn't, even though the success, there's success there in finding the governance model that I think we found, but the success, I think, that has come afterwards, that I think will realize itself as far as a lower subsidy from the city, which, let's be honest, that's what this is about, is trying to limit the amount of money that the city has to pay out to arts and heritage. If that's the goal, we need an asset to do that, and I'm not entirely sure that we have those in the buildings, in the structures that we have now to be able to bring in new types of revenue into our arts and culture.
Okay, thank you.
My thoughts are on it.
CAO.
First off, on the ACRD interaction, it's great direction from council and staff is that we develop and pursue a tripartite agreement with Jessica and the city. Full stop, that's the direction. So if committee of the role desires or recommends that the city also include that, develop a quad party, thank you, develop a quad party agreement that includes the regional district, then the committee of the whole should recommend to council that they pass a motion including ACRD in the governance model. Yeah, I've got a lot of thoughts on based on what councilors are saying. First off, I think the commission is being extremely polite. We have a commission with an empowering bylaw that is dated. There's a number of updates that are required, clearly, and we've not been using our commission as the bylaw intends. So I think the commission is saying, use us or tell us what our role is going to be, and I think that's incumbent upon us to undertake that work, and for senior staff to work with council, to work with the commission and determine what is the best use of a commission if we have a commission, and then make the adjustment to the bylaws so we all know what the rules are going to be, the rules of engagement, and then the commission could be an asset to the city, and we won't have meetings like this where they have to say, hey, you made a bunch of decisions without consulting us. Sorry, Bert. And to Councillor Alberni's comment, with McLean Mill, I think we've achieved some success this year, but it may not be about the model. It may be about the players. And if there are underlying issues that drive us to want to pursue a tripartite or a quad-party agreement, we should address those issues. Council should determine what are the things that we want achieved, and then let staff and the commission work together to propose models or methods that will achieve those underlying goals. I think maybe we're taking shots at what the model's going to be or what the solution is without fully grasping what it is we're trying to solve. And so this conversation, I think, is healthy because it makes us stop and revisit what do we actually want out of our heritage network, particularly our museum and our commission.
Okay, Councillor Sully.
I'll make my statement fairly short. I always told myself, if it's not broken, why are we trying to fix it? I feel what the committee has done is great work. Where it's broken, which I find, and the mayor has brought it up, is that I feel that for a city to be successful, to have a spirit in our city, to recognize our heritage, our culture, and so forth, it's important that such places as the museum, that the art center, and so far are properly funded. Where I think it's broken is that I feel the museum and the Rolling Arts are underfunded. But the thing is, we're coming back to a position that the city, what can we afford, and where are our priorities? Different councilors are going to have different priorities. My priority is, of course, that we need our city to be branded, to have an identity, and we recognize our identity through heritage. For me, it's very important. But I can't see it if it's not properly funded. And the only way to properly fund this and make it a successful, I don't know about going to a governance, because I see what the mayor's trying to do, because he's trying to get an objective of holding certain people, part of that board, accountable for what is going on in our community that represents their community or best interests. So I see that. And I do feel that regional districts should be stepping up and contributing to what we have in our community. But for me to sit here and say that the services that we're rendering right now is not suffice, or we don't have assets, I totally disagree. I think we have very big assets within the museum. We have great assets with the Rolling Arts Center. The problem is, how do we keep those two things alive? So I'm glad that our program director is here, is able to, I think we have to start again at zero, unfortunately, because Teresa is gone and so forth. It's going to take some time. I don't want council to pressure the commission in doing one way or the other. I would like to keep the commission intact, but the mayor's right. We have to find a proper way to properly fund something that is important to our city. Are we dissatisfied with the services being rendered right now? Absolutely not. My opinion, absolutely not. I've never seen and I've been in many small communities, I've never seen anything so proactive within our community, and I want to keep it that way. And I don't want any governance or extension of a committee to ruin that. I think we should be promoting it more, and this is what we're lacking in our community, is the promotion of heritage and so forth. And this is involving First Nations also, and regional district. So I hope with what work you'll be doing at the beginning will open the doors for the regional district and all that to actually properly fund these organizations that need it. Thank you.
So, Councillor Sovey, did you want to make the motion to include the ACRD in this process?
Yes, please.
Is there a seconder for that? Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor? Sorry, Councillor Paulson.
My question is are those the four groups that would want to involve? Are there other groups that should be accountable? Just before we move ahead, just think the ACRD, the city, both First Nations. Are there any other groups that anybody can think of?
Let's start if we can tell with those ones.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. That's true. Yeah.
Yep.
But, yeah. No, I just wanted to take a pause for a second and make sure.
Well, no, thanks for doing that, but in terms of governance within the valley, that's
Pretty well it.
pretty well it, unless you were going to do the Cherry Creek Water Board or something. No, I'm just kidding. On the motion, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, so then we had a second piece, which was the second motion I think we're looking for is the commission purpose to be established under the leadership of the director to achieve a new type of governance and new relationship. That's not, I'm not making that specific motion, but we could consider that.
Sure, you make the motion, I'll second it,
All
we'll
right,
figure out what it
I'm
means
making that
later.
motion in that case, that we establish the commission's purpose under the leadership of our Director of Community Services in order to achieve a new relationship within the commission and with the city of Port Alberni.
Sure, I'll second that, it sounded
Okay.
wonderful.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Carried. Okay, there we go. You've got a specific mandate. Voila.
Are you done yet?
Just a second.
Okay, go ahead. Any last words, council?
I just want to make a recommendation with regards to the bylaw itself, and maybe the CAO can, I don't know if it has to be a recommendation, that we review the current bylaw and make any revisions to the bylaw that either aren't relevant or we can add to it. And I think the addition of somebody from the McLean Mill Society to sit on your commission makes sense to me. And maybe under the commission, duties of the commission under A, I don't know if the McLean Mill National Historic Site should come out of that description. Advise on policies and objectives relating to operations of the Alberni Valley Museum, the McLean Mill National Historic Site, and other community heritage resources. The McLean Mill National Historic Site, does that make sense to keep that in
Frankly,
there?
I see that as a topic for discussion
Okay.
when the director moves that.
Sounds good. Thank you.
One more person
Yeah,
that would like to speak before
Bert.
I vote on anything.
I was just going to point out, that is our A on our duties of the commission. They've never consulted with us. The city has never consulted with us. It was just rammed through, and that's the way it is. So how can you have a commission that, well, lots of expertise, but nobody wants to listen to us?
Because now that it's directed to staff, as the staff representative, that's part of my role will be to facilitate that, ensure that, like you say, under 9A, that all those folks are brought to the table, and ensure that as I facilitate that process, that it exactly as you said, when I'm talking about honoring volunteers and respecting investments folks have made, it is not just ramming the feedback through and the it's not a foregone conclusion or predetermined outcome. It's, like I say, getting those folks to the table. So to answer your question, it's my job to get those folks there and ensure that they're there as well.
Okay. Any last words, council? Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On a completely different topic, our next committee of the whole meeting, should we include discussion about the provision of kitchen and yard waste collection services utilizing city resources and where the heck we're gonna put it? Or it could be something that the CAO is working on, but I'm just, after the news of buying the garbage trucks, the word on the street was pretty heavy about, okay, smart ass, where are you gonna put it? So.
Well, fortunately, we have from now until the time those things arrive here before we actually have to make that.
Sorry, I just didn't know if it was a topic for us, or is it a topic we'll bring up at the next council
Well,
meeting?
it is, I'm sure the CAO has some ideas, but in terms of our next topic for our committee of the whole, it's going to be a single topic, which is essentially crime in Southport. And it'll be, we'll make sure we have
We've
all
got
the
time,
necessary
yeah.
participants. Yeah, that's
New trucks aren't
that's
getting
frankly
yard waste.
more urgent than yard waste. Okay, council, I think we've probably covered everything related to this topic for now. We've got, and it's 7 o'clock, so unless there's some final words.
Just a quick thank you very much for listening to us, and I hope that you will listen in the future as well. We've got lots to contribute, so looking forward to further conversations. Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming, and thank you for asking for this opportunity. You came as a delegation to a recent council meeting and requested it, so thank you so much for doing that. And it does actually help us move the process forward a little bit. And I can't state strongly enough on behalf of council that yours is a function that we highly value. It's an important function for the city, but it's an important function for the entire valley. And we want to see it happen. We just want to make sure that everybody's included in that, in this deliberation. It isn't something that the council has the answer to. That's why we're giving it over to you guys. We do not have the answer. We just know we have an idea of ultimately where we'd like to go, but it isn't crystal clear in our minds. We just know we need to move it from what it is now, and Willa will represent us moving forward and keep us apprised of what the progress is. So, council, a motion to adjourn? Second? All in favor? Carried. And thank you very much, everybody. It's 7:05.